The pen felt heavier than it should have. It was a black fountain pen, polished to a mirror shine, the kind my father kept in the top drawer of his desk and used only when a signature mattered. I held it above the final page while 6 people watched my hand as if it were a clock counting down to their freedom. Marcus sat across from me, his shoulders relaxed for the first time since the funeral. My brother had perfected the expression of patient concern, but I could see triumph tightening the corners of his mouth. Victor Hales sat beside him, one finger resting against the silver cufflink at his wrist. Our family lawyer, Leonard Price, had arranged the papers into neat, obedient stacks. "Once you sign," Marcus said softly, "all of this can finally be over." He meant the estate, the questions, the arguments, the inconvenient existence of a daughter they had never believed capable of resisting them. I lowered my eyes, letting my hair fall forward enough to hide my face. They thought I was hesitating because I was frightened. They thought grief had hollowed me out and left behind someone easier to manage. They thought the folder beside my left hand contained the same papers they had placed before me. None of them had noticed that my folder was 2 shades darker. None of them knew Daniel was waiting outside. And none of them knew that I had already signed my name 3 times that morning. I touched the pen to the page. Then I remembered the phone call that had brought me home. 3 weeks earlier, I had been sitting alone in my apartment, eating soup over a spreadsheet, when Marcus called at 11:47 at night. He did not say hello. He did not ask whether I was sitting down. "Dad's dead," he said. For a moment, I heard only the low hum of my refrigerator. My father had always seemed too difficult to die. Richard Mercer built a shipping company from 1 rented truck, survived 2 recessions, a warehouse fire, and a hostile takeover. He had a voice that could stop a room and a temper that could empty one. Even illness seemed like something he would negotiate with and defeat before breakfast. "What happened?" I asked. "Heart attack, at the office." "At the office?" "He stayed late. Victor found him." Marcus spoke with the careful calm of someone repeating words he had practiced. I noticed that before I noticed my own tears. "When?" "A little after 9. I looked at the digital clock above my stove. Our father had been dead for almost 3 hours, and no one had called me. "I'm coming home," I said. There was a pause. "You don't have to come tonight." That was the first moment I understood that something was wrong. I had not lived in the Mercer house for 11 years. I left at 24 with 2 suitcases, a degree in accounting, and the quiet certainty that if I stayed, I would spend my life becoming smaller so Marcus could continue feeling large. In our family, Marcus was the future. I was the careful one. He shook hands with investors. I corrected the numbers in the reports he presented. He gave speeches at company dinners. I stood near the back and listened to my father praise his instincts. My instincts, according to my father, were too cautious. "You see problems everywhere, Elena," he once told me. "Business requires courage." When I resigned from Mercer Global, my father called it an emotional decision. When I became a forensic accountant, he called it respectable but narrow. He never understood why I preferred tracing stolen money to helping powerful men earn more of it. Still, I loved him. Love does not always survive on kindness. Sometimes it survives on fragments. The way he brought me tea when I studied late, the old calculator he used to teach me percentages, the pride he tried to hide when I passed my certification exam. My father rarely apologized, but he remembered every number that mattered to me. By sunrise, I was driving toward the house where I had learned both obedience and suspicion. The iron gates were open when I arrived. Cars lined the circular drive. Through the front windows, I saw relatives moving beneath chandeliers, dressed in black before the funeral had even been arranged. My Aunt Celia met me at the door and folded me into a perfume-heavy embrace. "You poor thing," she whispered. Then, without releasing me, she asked, "Did Richard ever discuss the voting shares with you?" Grief had entered the house, but greed had arrived first. They spoke of my father with wet eyes and of his assets with dry voices. Marcus stood near the fireplace receiving sympathy like a new title. When he saw me, he crossed the room quickly and held me. For 1 second, he was my brother again. I felt his chest tremble, and I almost believed we were two children standing together against something unbearable. Then he whispered, "Don't go into Dad's office." I pulled back. Why? The police sealed it. The police. Standard procedure. Victor Hale appeared before Marcus had to explain further. He was tall, silver-haired, and immaculate, even at dawn. He had been my father's business partner for 26 years and had a talent for making ownership look like friendship. "Elena," he said, taking both my hands, "your father loved you more than he knew how to say." It was the right sentence. That made me distrust it. "What happened?" I asked. Victor's face softened. Richard had been unwell. No, he hadn't. He hid it, pride, you know. I thought of the call I had received from my father 4 nights earlier. We had spoken for only 7 minutes, but his breathing had been steady. His voice had not sounded weak. It had sounded afraid. He had asked whether old account numbers could be traced after a bank marked them inactive. I joked that numbers never truly disappeared. He did not laugh. Then he said, "People confuse closed with gone." Before I could ask what he meant, he told me he would explain soon. At the time, I assumed it was another test, another awkward attempt to involve me in business without admitting he needed my help. At the funeral home, standing between Marcus and Victor, I understood that it might have been a warning. The funeral took place 2 days later beneath a sky so bright it seemed insulting. More than 400 people attended. Employees stood behind politicians, investors, and men whose names appeared on buildings. Marcus delivered the eulogy. His voice broke in exactly the right places. "Our father believed family was the foundation of everything," he said. I watched him from the front pew and remembered his warning at the door. "Do not go into Dad's office." After the burial, Marcus accepted condolences for 20 minutes, then disappeared into a car with Victor and Leonard Price. I followed at a distance and saw them return to company headquarters. By the time I arrived, security had been instructed not to let me upstairs. "My brother is expecting me," I lied. The guard looked uncomfortable. He had known me since I was 16. "I'm sorry, Ms. Mercer. Mr. Mercer said the executive floor is restricted." Mr. Mercer. My father had been buried less than an hour, and Marcus had already inherited the name. I went back to the family house and stood outside my father's locked study. A strip of police tape crossed the door, but it had been cut and pressed back together. Someone had entered after the room was sealed. I did not touch it. Not yet. That evening, Marcus called a family meeting in the library. Victor stood beside the mantel. Leonard placed a leather portfolio on the table. Marcus began with an apology. "I hate that we have to discuss practical matters so soon." No one who hates power moves toward it that quickly. He explained that the company required stable leadership. Markets were sensitive. Employees were frightened. Our father's sudden death had created uncertainty, and uncertainty, Marcus said, could destroy everything Richard built. He spoke as if the company were a wounded animal, only he could save. Then Leonard opened the portfolio. "These are preliminary estate documents," he said. "Routine authorizations, temporary voting arrangements, confidentiality protections." He placed a stack before me. I did not pick it up. Marcus leaned closer. "You never wanted this life, Elena. You said that yourself." I said I didn't want to work under Dad. "Exactly, and I stayed." Victor sat beside me, with the tenderness of a doctor delivering bad news. "The cleanest solution is continuity," he said. "Marcus assumes operational control. You receive a generous settlement. No public dispute, no disruption, no unnecessary pain." "How generous?" Marcus answered before Leonard could. "Enough to clear your mortgage and your other obligations." I looked at him. My mortgage was public record. My other obligation was not. 2 years earlier, I had guaranteed part of a medical loan for a friend. Only the bank and my accountant knew. Marcus smiled sadly. We're family, I know when you're struggling. It sounded caring. It felt like a hand closing around my throat. Leonard pushed the stack toward me. There is no need to decide tonight. However, delay may invite competing claims and costly litigation. What claims? Possible challenges to your father's latest estate plan. Latest. 3 faces, changed by less than a breath. Leonard recovered first, a standard expression. I lifted the first page. The agreement transferred my voting rights to Marcus indefinitely. Another clause prohibited me from requesting internal company records without board approval. A third required me to waive claims arising from decisions made during the previous 5 years. This was not an estate shortcut. It was a wall built around something they did not want me to see. I don't understand most of this, I said. Marcus relaxed. Leonard adopted the slow tone professionals use when they believe confusion proves inferiority. It means you will not be burdened with business matters. I turned another page. The document was dated 2 days before my father died. A draft could be prepared early. A signature agreement could not know the date of death before death occurred. I kept my face blank. Can I take these upstairs? Leonard glanced at Victor. For review, I added quickly. I'm tired, I'm not saying no. Victor touched my shoulder. Of course, we only want you protected. I carried the papers to my childhood bedroom, locked the door, and photographed every page. At 3 a.m, I found the altered will. It was attached as an exhibit near the back, easy to miss beneath schedules of property and insurance. According to that version, my father had granted Marcus controlling interest 6 months earlier and reduced my inheritance to a fixed payment. The signature resembled his, but the pressure pattern did not. My father's hand always dragged slightly upward on the final letter of his surname. This signature ended flat. More important, the witness was a former company officer who had died 8 months before the date printed on the document. I sat on the floor beside my bed, surrounded by pages designed to erase me, and felt something colder than grief settle into place. They had not merely prepared for my father's death. They had prepared for my obedience. The next morning, I acted confused. I asked Marcus whether voting shares were like ordinary shares. I asked Leonard if I needed my own lawyer. I asked Victor whether signing would make everyone stop arguing. Each question made them gentler. People reveal themselves when they believe they are explaining the world to someone weaker. I lowered my eyes and said I needed a few days. Marcus sighed, kissed my forehead, and agreed. The moment he left, I went to my father's study. The police tape peeled away without resistance. Inside, everything looked almost normal. His glasses rested beside the blotter. A half-empty cup had left a brown ring on the desk. The family photograph on the shelf showed Marcus at graduation, smiling between our parents. I was visible only at the edge, one shoulder cut off by the frame. The drawers had been searched. Files leaned at wrong angles. The locked cabinet behind the curtains stood open and empty. On the lowest shelf sat the calculator. It was an old gray model with yellowed buttons, useless in a room containing 3 computers. When I was 9, my father used it to teach me compound interest. He told me money was not powerful because of what it bought. It was powerful because it remembered where it had been. I pressed the power button. Nothing happened. When I turned it over, I saw a fresh scratch beside the battery cover. Inside, beneath 2 corroded batteries, lay a micro storage card wrapped in clear tape. My hands began to shake. I closed the study door, carried the calculator upstairs, and inserted the card into my laptop. There were 4 audio files and 1 encrypted folder. The first recording began with 40 seconds of silence. Then my father spoke. Elena, if you found this, I failed to tell you in person. His voice cracked on the final word. I owe you an apology, he continued. More than one. I called caution weakness because your caution exposed risks I preferred not to see. I favored Marcus because he reflected the part of me I understood. That was unfair to both of you. I covered my mouth. Apologies from the dead arrive without mercy. They give you what you wanted when there is no longer any way to answer. My father breathed heavily, then said, "There are irregularities in the company accounts. Significant ones. Victor knows I discovered them. Marcus may be involved. I do not yet know how deeply." A sound came from somewhere beyond him. He stopped speaking. When he resumed, his voice was lower. "Do not sign anything they put in front of you. Not immediately. Not because they say it is for the family. The proof is in the accounts they told you were closed." The recording ended. I listened again. Then a third time. On the fourth, I stopped hearing my father and started hearing evidence. Accounts, closed, Victor, Marcus, signatures. Grief wanted me to collapse. Training told me to make copies. I duplicated the card onto 2 encrypted drives, uploaded another copy to a secure server, and placed the original back inside the calculator. Then I began searching. Using credentials saved in his encrypted folder, I found 7 dormant accounts. 4 showed nothing unusual. The 5th had received small transfers from company subsidiaries, each labeled as equipment reconciliation. The amounts were modest enough to avoid internal review, but together they exceeded $9 million. The money then moved through 3 shell companies. One was registered to a post office box. Another listed a law office that had closed years earlier. The third, Hale's Strategic Advisory, shared an address with a property owned by Victor's sister. My stomach tightened. I traced authorization logs. Several transfers used my father's digital credentials on days he was out of the country. 2 occurred while he was hospitalized for knee surgery. Someone had used his identity. Or someone with access had helped them. Marcus had access. Near dawn, I found recurring payments to a private security company called Northwatch Solutions. The invoices described executive protection. The assignment notes described something else. Subject departed residence at 0710. Subject met unidentified female accountant. Subject retained blue folder after board session. The subject was my father. Someone inside his own company had paid strangers to follow him. Surveillance wanted control. For the first time, I wondered whether my father's heart attack had been convenient because someone had made it convenient. I needed a person, not another file. Daniel Cho had served as my father's executive assistant for 18 years. He knew every meeting, every visitor, every door that remained closed. He also had a wife and 2 young sons, which meant fear had more than one way to reach him. I called from a prepaid phone. He answered after 6 rings. "Daniel, it's Elena." Silence. "I need to ask about the night my father died." "I'm sorry, Ms. Mercer. I can't help you." "You were there." "I left early." "The access logs show your badge at 10:14. His breathing changed. "Please don't call again." "Daniel, he left me a recording." The line went quiet enough that I checked whether he had disconnected. Finally, he said, "Where are you?" We met in the back corner of a crowded train station cafe. Daniel arrived wearing a baseball cap and sat facing the exit. "You should stop," he said before I spoke. "Did Marcus tell you that?" "No." "Victor." He looked at the table. I placed one earbud between us and played 20 seconds of my father's message. Daniel's face folded. He removed the earbud and pressed both hands against his eyes. "He knew," he whispered. "He knew he might not get out." "Get out of what?" Daniel glanced around. "Your father planned to remove Victor from the board. Marcus, too, temporarily. He found transfers, false contracts, pension money being used to cover losses." "Pension money?" Daniel nodded. "He was going to announce an independent audit on Monday." "He died Friday." "There was a meeting that night. Richard, Victor, Marcus, Leonard." "And you." I was outside. They were shouting. Your father told them the company would survive the truth. Victor said the truth would destroy all of them. What happened next? Daniel's fingers trembled around his cup. I heard something break. Then security told me to leave the floor. Victor said it was a family matter. But your badge was used later. My badge disappeared from my desk. He reached inside his jacket and slid a small envelope toward me. Inside were printed meeting notes and access logs. I copied these before they locked the system, he said. Then I deleted the copies from my computer. Why keep them? Because loyalty is not the same as obedience. The sentence seemed to cost him. Was Marcus involved? I asked. Daniel did not answer directly. Your brother attended every meeting. That was enough. When we stood to leave, Daniel caught my wrist. They are watching who you contact. Do not trust your phone. Do not trust the house. And do not assume Victor needs permission from Marcus. For the next 4 days, I became the version of myself my family expected. At breakfast, I wore my robe and stared at untouched coffee. I let Aunt Celia answer questions for me. I told Marcus I had barely slept. When Victor asked whether I had reviewed the documents, I said the words blurred together. In private, I built a map. Evidence is not truth until it can survive denial. I needed originals, admissions, and protection. Marcus came to my apartment on a rainy Thursday evening. I knew he had entered before I unlocked the door. The hall light was on, though I always left it off. He stood by the window, holding 2 glasses of wine. You still keep the spare key above the utility box, he said. No, I moved it 3 years ago. His smile faded for half a second. Then he offered me a glass. I left it on the table. You shouldn't be alone, he said. You could have called. I'm your brother. That isn't an answer. Do you remember the lake house? He asked. You were 8. You fell off the dock and grabbed my shirt so hard you nearly pulled me in. You pushed me off the dock. I pulled you out. He sat beside me. I know you think something is wrong. Why would you think that? Because you accessed archived accounts. My pulse jumped, but I forced my hands to remain still. I was curious. You were always curious. Dad encouraged that when it suited him. Marcus looked suddenly tired. Elena, listen to me. There are things inside every large company that look ugly when removed from context. Decisions, transfers, agreements. Dad understood that. Did he? He was not the saint everyone buried. I never said he was. If you keep digging, you could destroy his reputation. There it was, not a denial but a threat dressed as concern. And yours? I asked. His eyes sharpened. He touched my shoulder gently. I am trying to protect you from a war you cannot win. The tenderness frightened me more than anger would have. Sign the agreement, he said. Take the money, go back to your life. My life seems to interest you a great deal. Because I love you. No, I said quietly. Because you underestimated me, and now you're checking whether that was a mistake. For one dangerous second, the mask vanished. Then Marcus laughed. There she is, he said, Dad's little auditor. He kissed the top of my head and left. I waited until his car disappeared before checking the apartment. Desk drawers stood slightly open. A stack of mail had been reordered. The lining beneath my jewelry box was torn. The calculator lay on the kitchen counter. The battery cover was missing. So was the storage card. I sat down slowly and let the silence swallow me. They had entered my home. They had taken my father's final words. They wanted me to know they could reach anything I touched. For several minutes, I allowed myself to look defeated. Then I opened the freezer, removed a bag of coffee, and took out the encrypted drive hidden beneath it. The original mattered emotionally. The copies mattered legally. Marcus had stolen a memory and mistaken it for the truth. The next morning, I called Mara Voss, an investigative attorney whose work I knew from a corporate bribery case. I expected an assistant. Mara answered herself. I gave her 3 facts: forged estate documents, unauthorized transfers, and surveillance of a deceased executive. She interrupted me before I reached the 4th. Do not say anything else on the phone. Your evidence implicates people with money, access, and a strong incentive to discredit you, she said. Therefore, from this moment, assume every emotional reaction you have will be used as proof that you are unstable. I have been trained for that my whole life. She looked at me for a long moment. Good, she said. Then we can use it. Mara contacted Assistant United States Attorney Jonah Reed, who specialized in financial crimes. Reed did not care about my inheritance. That reassured me. He cared about pension theft, forged authorizations, obstruction, and whether the evidence had been obtained legally. We spent hours organizing files. Every claim needed a source. Every source needed a chain of custody. My father's recordings were powerful, but without corroboration, they could be dismissed as the suspicions of a frightened man. Daniel provided deleted calendar entries. Mara subpoenaed archived banking metadata through an emergency process. Reed confirmed that Hale's strategic advisory had moved funds into properties controlled by Victor. The pattern slowly became a structure. Still, Reed warned us that knowing was not the same as proving intent. They will say Richard authorized everything, he said. They will say the estate dispute made you vindictive. They will say the documents were routine. Then we make them explain the documents. Mara understood first. The signing meeting, she said. Marcus had scheduled it for the following Tuesday. He believed the delay had worn me down. I would agree to sign, ask simple questions, and let him and Victor reassure me in their own words. The room would be recorded lawfully with my consent. Daniel would remain nearby with duplicate evidence. Once they acknowledged the purpose of the waivers and the transfer of control, Reed could move to freeze the disputed assets. We prepared 3 documents of our own. The first was my sworn affidavit describing the fraud. The second authorized release of all evidence to investigators. The third preserved my claims and requested emergency restraint of the assets. From a distance, they looked like Leonard's agreements. That mattered greatly. My role was simple and almost impossible. I had to appear broken enough to make arrogant men honest. I returned to the family house and apologized to Marcus. I'm tired, I told him. I don't want to fight. His relief was immediate. You never had to. I know. Those 2 words tasted like surrender. I made myself say them anyway. Victor arrived that evening with flowers. Leonard revised the settlement upward. Aunt Celia told me I was making the mature choice. The kinder they became, the more clearly I saw the machinery beneath their kindness. But preparing to expose them forced me to confront a question I had avoided. Was my father worth saving? Daniel's records showed Richard had suspected missing funds nearly 3 years earlier. He delayed the audit. He approved quiet internal settlements. He protected Victor from questions because scandal might damage the company. Employees had continued contributing to pensions, while executives borrowed against the fund. My father had not stolen the money, but his silence had guarded the people who did. I listened to his first recording again and felt anger rise through grief. He had spent years dismissing my warnings, then turned to me when his own courage failed. He had left me evidence, danger, and an apology I could never reject to his face. For one bitter hour, I considered walking away. Let Marcus inherit the wreckage. Let Victor take the money. Let the Mercer name collapse under the weight my father had helped place upon it. Then I opened the second audio file. My father's voice was weaker. I told myself delay protected the employees, he said. That was vanity. I was protecting my name. By the time I admitted it, the pension exposure was larger than the company could quietly repair. He paused. There are people in our warehouses who gave us 30 years. They trusted signatures on statements I approved. If I remain silent, my failure becomes their poverty. I closed my eyes. I do not ask you to defend me, Elena. Do not make me better than I was. Tell the truth, including the part that condemns me. His honesty did not erase his cowardice. It made accountability possible. That was when I understood the difference between saving a man and saving what his final choice might protect. I was not fighting to preserve my father's reputation. I was fighting to prevent his worst mistake from becoming thousands of other people's punishment. On the morning of the signing, rain struck the windows of Mercer Global in thin silver lines. I dressed in gray because Marcus once told me gray made people disappear. I carried Leonard's documents in one folder and ours in another. Beneath my blouse, a small recorder rested against my skin, though the room itself had already been equipped. Daniel met me in the lobby. "You can still leave," he whispered. "So can you." He shook his head. Not anymore. Fear had drained the color from his face, but he stayed. That was courage as I had come to understand it. Not confidence, not calm, but the decision that something else mattered more than escape. Mara waited in a car across the street. Reed and his team were nearby, prepared to act once the admissions were captured and the final authorization transmitted. The elevator rose. With each floor, I remembered a different version of myself inside that building. The child carrying lunch to her father. The teenager hiding in conference rooms to finish homework. The young analyst correcting Marcus's projections after midnight and watching him receive applause the next morning. By the time the doors opened, I no longer felt like any of them. Leonard greeted me outside the boardroom. "Everyone appreciates your cooperation." "Do they?" He mistook the question for nervousness. "This is the best outcome available." Inside, Marcus stood at the far end of the long table. Victor sat to his right. Aunt Celia and 2 board members had been invited as witnesses, a small audience for my surrender. My father's chair waited at the head. They expected me to sit elsewhere. I walked to it and sat down. Marcus noticed. His smile tightened, but he said nothing. Leonard arranged the papers before me, aligning each corner with care. "We will proceed in order," he said. "The voting proxy first, followed by the release, confidentiality provisions, and settlement acknowledgement." I placed my darker folder beside my left hand. Victor glanced at it, then away. That tiny dismissal nearly made me smile. Marcus sat across from me, his shoulders finally relaxed. He looked almost peaceful. "Once you sign," he said softly, "all of this can finally be over." The sentence returned me to the moment where this story began. 6 people watched my hand. Outside the door, Daniel waited with evidence they believed destroyed. Across the street, Mara waited for my signal. Somewhere below us, investigators waited for men who had mistaken silence for consent. I opened Leonard's first document and read the signature line. Then I opened my folder. The pages inside looked nearly identical, except for the words that mattered. Sworn affidavit. Authorization for disclosure. Emergency preservation of assets. I removed them slowly and placed them beneath Leonard's cover sheet. No one spoke. I picked up my father's pen. It no longer felt heavy. Marcus leaned forward. "Elena." I looked at my brother, then at Victor, then at the empty chair reflected in the rain-darkened window behind them. For most of my life, they had believed surrender was my natural state. They had confused patience with fear, restraint with ignorance, and love with permission. I touched the pen to the page. "I'm ready," I said. The room became so quiet that I could hear rainwater ticking against the glass. I did not sign immediately. That was the first surprise I gave them. Marcus had leaned forward, ready to watch me surrender, but I lifted the pen and looked down at the first clause as if the language frightened me. "Before I do this," I said, "I need to understand something." Leonard's smile remained professional. "Of course." I pointed to the paragraph, transferring my voting rights. "This means Marcus controls my shares." "Temporarily," Leonard said. "How temporarily?" His eyes moved toward Victor. Victor folded his hands. For as long as stability requires. So there is no fixed end date. An end date would create uncertainty. I nodded slowly, pretending to absorb the explanation. And if I want to review the company records later? You will not need to, Victor replied. That is not what I asked. For the first time, irritation crossed his face. Leonard stepped in. The agreement limits access to confidential records unless the board approves a request. And Marcus controls the board. Operationally, Marcus said. So if I sign, I cannot examine the company without his permission. Marcus gave me the patient look he had used since we were children, whenever he wanted other people to believe I was being difficult. You said you wanted this over. I do. I just want to hear what over means. He glanced at Victor. Neither man understood that every answer was being recorded. I moved to the release clause. This says I waive claims connected to decisions made during the previous 5 years, even decisions I do not know about. Victor answered before Leonard could soften it. Yes. And if money was moved improperly? Nothing was moved improperly, he said. But if it was? His jaw tightened. Then your signature would still resolve the issue. There it was. Not confusion, not routine paperwork, knowledge. I kept my eyes lowered. Marcus exhaled and leaned back. Elena, if you challenge this later, it will become public. Your finances will be examined. Your judgment will be questioned. Every mistake you have ever made could become part of the case. Are you warning me? I am protecting you. From what? From humiliation, he said, and from losing more than you can afford. Aunt Celia shifted uncomfortably, but Victor looked almost pleased. Victory makes careless people honest. I turned to the confidentiality clause. If I sign, I cannot speak to employees, regulators, or reporters about anything I discover. That is correct, Leonard said. And the settlement depends on my silence. It depends on your cooperation. Different word, same cage. I placed Leonard's document flat on the table and opened my darker folder. My hands were steady now. I slid the first page beneath his cover sheet and signed. Marcus smiled. I signed the second. Victor adjusted his cuff link. I signed the third, closed the pen, and pushed the pages across the table. For 2 full seconds, they believed they had won. Then Leonard looked down. His expression changed before anyone else understood. What is this? He asked. Marcus laughed once. It is her signature, Leonard. No, Leonard said. This is not the proxy. Victor snatched the top page from him. I watched his eyes move across the heading. Sworn affidavit. The color left his face. Marcus reached for the stack. Elena, what did you sign? The truth. He read the second page, then the third. Authorization for disclosure. Emergency preservation of disputed assets. His mouth opened, but no words came. I leaned back in my father's chair. I signed the papers you gave me, I said, but not the ones you expected me to sign. Victor stood so quickly that his chair struck the wall. Where is the evidence? The kindness disappeared from his voice. There was no grieving partner now, no patient advisor, no man protecting a fragile daughter, only fear wearing an expensive suit. Marcus stared at me as if I had become a stranger. You set us up. I asked questions, you answered them. You recorded this. That depends, I said, on whether you have said anything worth recording. Victor slammed both palms on the table. Where is it? Aunt Celia gasped. One board member stood, uncertain whether to leave. Leonard gathered his papers, but his hands shook badly enough to scatter them. Marcus pointed at me. You are betraying this family. I almost laughed, but grief caught the sound before it escaped. You forged a will. His face hardened. You tried to take my rights, hide the records, and frighten me into silence. Do not call the consequences of that betrayal. You have no idea what you are doing. I know exactly what I am doing. You could destroy the company. No, the people who stole from it did that. Victor moved around the table toward me. Your father made difficult decisions. That is what leadership requires. Leadership does not require shell companies. His step stopped. That was the first confirmation I saw in his eyes. Marcus noticed it too. I continued. It does not require forged authorizations, surveillance payments, or pension money rooted through Hale's strategic advisory. Aunt Celia whispered Victor's name. He ignored her. You are confused, he said. You have been manipulated by incomplete records. Then full records should help. His calm cracked. Give me the files. No. He reached for my folder. Marcus grabbed it first and emptied it onto the table. Copies scattered across the polished wood. He searched between pages, tore open the side pocket, and shook the folder as if a drive might fall from its lining. There is nothing here. Correct. Where are the originals? Several places. His eyes lifted. My attorney has one set. Federal investigators have another. Daniel has the remaining archive. At the mention of Daniel, Victor became very still. I knew immediately that I had said too much. The remaining archive contained the security footage Daniel had recovered that morning. We had not yet transmitted it because the file was too large for the protected channel, and Daniel had insisted on delivering the drive himself. Victor looked toward the boardroom door. Then he reached beneath the table and pressed something. The fire alarm erupted. A mechanical bell hammered through the room. Red lights began flashing above the doors. For one confused instant, no one moved. Then the building's automated voice ordered evacuation. Victor crossed the room before I could stand. He shoved past Leonard, opened the door, and disappeared into the corridor. Marcus followed. I ran after them. Elena, Leonard shouted, stay here. The hallway was filling with employees. Doors opened. People moved toward the stairwells while security guards tried to direct them. I saw Victor turn toward the private elevator. Marcus caught up beside him. They were not escaping the building. They were looking for Daniel. My phone vibrated. Mara. Investigators are entering, she said when I answered. Go to the lobby. Victor knows Daniel has the drive. Do not follow him. I pushed through the crowd. Elena, listen to me. The evidence is duplicated. Not that file. What file? The elevator doors closed on Victor and Marcus. The security recording. Mara swore. Where is Daniel? He said he would wait in the records annex. Then tell security, do not go down there alone. The safe decision was obvious. Investigators were coming. Victor's accounts could be frozen without the footage. I had already done what the plan required. Then I remembered Daniel in the station cafe, hands trembling around a paper cup. I remembered him saying loyalty was not obedience. He had risked his job, his family, and perhaps his life because I had asked him to help expose men I was related to. Safety was waiting upstairs. Responsibility was below me. I entered the emergency stairwell. The records annex occupied 2 underground levels beneath an older building connected to headquarters by a service tunnel. My father had stored decades of contracts there because he distrusted digital archives. The alarm echoed through concrete walls. Sprinklers had not activated, which told me Victor had triggered the system without reporting a fire. I called Daniel. No answer. I called again while descending. On the second attempt, someone picked up. I heard breathing, then Victor's voice. Go back upstairs, Elena. My stomach turned cold. Where is Daniel? Safe for the moment. What have you done? What you forced me to do. The line ended. Fear is strange when it finally arrives. I had expected panic, but what I felt was clarity. Every sound became separate. My shoes striking metal steps, the alarm above me, blood moving in my ears. At the tunnel entrance, the security door stood open. I stepped through. The corridor beyond was narrow and dim. Emergency lights cast the walls in red. Shelves of boxed files rose behind wire partitions. At the far end, a door slammed. I followed. Voices carried from the main storage room. Victor was speaking. "You have 2 sons, Daniel. Think carefully about what loyalty buys them." I moved closer without entering. Marcus said, "Give him the drive. This has gone far enough." Daniel answered, "You said that after Richard collapsed." Silence followed. Then Victor's voice lowered. "You misunderstand what happened. I saw what happened. And no one will believe you over us. They will believe the video." I reached the doorway. Daniel stood against a bank of filing cabinets. Victor faced him with one hand extended. Marcus stood to the side, pale and sweating. Daniel held a small black drive. Victor smiled. "I can make this disappear," he said. "I can give you enough money to take your family anywhere. New home, new names if necessary, no trial, no reporters, no danger." "And if I refuse?" Victor's smile remained. "Then your wife will learn how much danger you brought to her door." Daniel's fingers tightened around the drive. Marcus saw me first. "Elena, leave." Victor turned. For a moment, rage transformed his face so completely that I saw how much effort his charm had always required. "You should have listened to your brother," he said. "You should have listened to my father." My voice shook. I hated that it shook until I understood that courage did not require it to stop. I looked at Daniel. "He cannot protect your family." Victor laughed. "I am the only person here who can." "No," I said. "He is the reason they need protection." Daniel looked from me to Victor. "If you give him that drive, you do not become safe. You only remove the last reason he has to bargain with you." Victor's expression changed. Daniel noticed. So did Marcus. The drive remained in Daniel's hand. Victor stepped closer. "Give it to me." Daniel shook his head. Victor lunged. Marcus moved between them, but Victor shoved him into a shelf. Boxes crashed to the floor. Daniel ran toward the opposite aisle. I followed, but Marcus caught my arm. "This is your fault." I pulled free. "No, this is what your choices look like without a conference table." He blocked my path. "You think Dad trusted you because you were better than me. This is not about who he loved more. It was always about that." The alarm seemed farther away in the narrow aisle. Marcus's face changed. For the first time, I did not see my older brother, the golden son, or the man who had tried to erase me. I saw a frightened boy who had spent his life auditioning for a father incapable of giving either of us what we needed. "I stayed," he said. "You left. I gave him everything. Every weekend, every relationship, every piece of myself he demanded. Then at the end, he gave you the truth. He gave me a problem he was too late to solve. He trusted you. He used me too." Marcus flinched. The truth connected us for 1 second, not as allies, but as 2 people injured by the same man in different ways. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. "There is still a way out." "What is that?" "Account access. Victor cannot move the reserve funds without my approval. Neither can the prosecutors, not yet." He stepped closer. "There is more money than you found. Offshore, enough for both of us." I stared at him. "Help me get the drive," he said. "We destroy the footage, settle the pension claims quietly, and split the rest. We can leave all of this behind." "You are offering me stolen money." "I am offering you freedom." "No, you are offering me your prison with a better view." His jaw tightened. "Think about what Dad did to us." "I have." "Then why protect his company?" "I am not protecting his company. I am protecting the people you treated like numbers." "We can compensate them." With part of what you stole. With enough. That is how this started, Marcus. You decided enough was whatever allowed you to keep the rest. Pain moved across his face and hardened into anger. We could finally be equal. I almost felt sorry for him. You still think equality means taking what someone else has. I stepped around him. He did not stop me. At the end of the aisle, I found Victor wrestling Daniel against a metal table. The drive skittered across the surface. I grabbed it first. Victor seized my wrist. His fingers crushed the bones together. Give it to me. I drove my shoulder into his chest, but he barely moved. He twisted my arm until I cried out. Marcus appeared behind him. For one suspended moment, my brother watched Victor hurt me. I saw the decision happen before he moved. Marcus grabbed Victor and pulled him away. Enough. Victor struck him across the face. Marcus staggered, then came back harder. They collided with the table. Daniel pulled me toward the exit. Go, Marcus shouted. Victor reached for the drive again. I held it against my chest. Footsteps thundered in the corridor. Investigators entered with weapons drawn, followed by building security and Mara. Victor froze. Marcus released him and raised both hands. The alarm continued ringing above us, absurdly loud, as if the building itself had finally decided to tell the truth. 2 agents restrained Victor. Another approached Marcus. I helped her, Marcus said. No one answered. He looked at me. I understood what he wanted, a promise, a signal that the final choice had erased the others. It had not. Tell them everything, I said. Elena. Redemption starts with consequences, not escape. His face broke, but he nodded. Daniel placed the drive in Mara's hand. We watched the security footage that afternoon in a federal interview room. The image was grainy, filmed from a ceiling camera outside my father's office. There was no sound for the first minute, then Daniel's recovered audio synchronized with the video. My father stood behind his desk. Victor faced him. Marcus was near the window. Leonard sat by the door. You stole from people who trusted us, my father said. Victor remained calm. We borrowed against a fund to protect the company. You moved it into private accounts. To keep options open. You bought property. Assets. My father turned to Marcus. You approved the transfers. Marcus looked down. You told me Victor had your consent. And when you discovered he lied. Marcus did not answer. My father picked up a blue folder. Monday, I announced the audit. Both of you resign tonight. Victor crossed the room. You will destroy the company. No, I will tell the truth about it. You think truth makes you noble now. My father's hand moved toward his chest. At first, I thought he was angry. Then he stumbled. Marcus stepped forward. Victor did not. My father reached for the small medication case on the desk. Victor picked it up before he could. Call an ambulance, Marcus said. Victor held the case. Not yet. The room in which we watched seemed to shrink. On the screen, my father collapsed against the desk. Daniel appeared at the doorway. He reached for his phone. Leonard blocked him. Victor knelt beside my father, but did not open the medication case. Give it to him, Marcus said. Victor looked up. If emergency services arrive now, they see the documents. They question everyone. We need to clear the room. He cannot breathe. We need 5 minutes. My father's hand moved weakly across the carpet. Marcus stood frozen. Daniel tried to push past Leonard. A security guard entered and dragged him into the corridor. The video timer continued. 1 minute. 2. 3. Marcus paced, crying, but he did not take the medication from Victor. He did not call for help. At 4 minutes and 38 seconds, Victor opened the case. At 6 minutes, Leonard called emergency services. My father never regained consciousness. I had imagined murder as an act of obvious violence, a weapon, a blow, a decision made in rage. What I saw was quieter. A man withheld help. Another man obeyed. A third protected the door. My father died inside the space between what they could have done and what they chose not to do. I left the room before the footage ended and vomited in a restroom sink. Mara found me sitting on the floor. "Victor will be charged," she said gently. "The others too, depending on cooperation and evidence." I stared at the tile. Marcus told him to call. He also helped conceal the delay. I know. There was no version of the truth that gave me my brother back. By evening, the investigation was public. The first headline called it a Mercer family war. The second described me as an estranged daughter, challenging her father's estate. Within hours, photographs of my apartment, my mortgage, and my old employment dispute appeared online. Commentators who had never met me discussed whether grief had made me unstable. Victor's attorneys released a statement accusing me of manipulating records to seize control of the company. A former board member told a reporter I had always resented Marcus. Aunt Celia called me and screamed that I had destroyed the family. "Victor let Dad die," I said. "You do not know what pressure they were under." I ended the call. The company's share price collapsed. Customers suspended contracts. Employees gathered outside warehouses demanding answers about their pensions. For 48 hours, I became the villain in a story written by people with better publicists. Mara advised silence. Reed advised patience. Neither had to watch retired employees crying on television because they believed their savings were gone. So I released a timeline. Not the footage, not private family messages, not details designed to humiliate Marcus. I released dates, transfers, shell companies, pension losses, forged authorizations, and the steps taken to preserve the remaining assets. Every statement linked to supporting records. At the top, I wrote one sentence. "This case is not about my inheritance. It is about money taken from people who earned it." The narrative began to change. Employees shared the timeline. Financial reporters verified the transfers. Former Mercer accountants came forward with questions they had been ordered not to ask. A warehouse supervisor named Rosa Delgado gave an interview outside the company's oldest distribution center. "I worked here 32 years, she said. "Ms. Mercer risked her name because people like me do not have one powerful enough to get heard." I watched the clip alone in my apartment and cried harder than I had at the funeral. Truth did not win because it was cleaner. It won because ordinary people recognized themselves inside it. The consequences reached beyond the newspapers. Banks froze routine credit lines, suppliers demanded payment in advance, and frightened customers called every hour asking whether the company would survive. I spent mornings with investigators and afternoons in warehouses, standing before employees who had every reason to distrust the Mercer name. Some meetings ended with applause. Others ended with people walking out. At the West Terminal, an elderly mechanic named Thomas Reed held up a pension statement and asked why he should believe another promise signed by someone from my family. I had prepared charts, recovery estimates, and legal explanations. None of them answered the question he was truly asking. "You should not believe me because of my name," I said. "You should believe only what you can verify." I gave the employees access to the recovery accounts, audit schedules, and board reports. I invited their representatives into meetings where executives had once spoken about them without them. Trust did not return as forgiveness. It returned as inspection. That lesson changed me. My father had believed leadership meant carrying decisions alone. Victor believed it meant keeping others dependent. Marcus believed it meant winning approval from the person above him. I began to believe leadership meant creating a system strong enough to question the leader. There were days when I wanted revenge instead. I wanted Victor to hear every employee describe what his greed had cost. I wanted Marcus to feel the loneliness he had designed for me. I wanted to release every humiliating message, every recording, every private excuse. Mara asked me one evening what outcome I wanted. The truth, I said. That is evidence. I asked what you want. I looked through the conference room window at reporters waiting outside. I want them to hurt. Saying it aloud frightened me. Mara did not judge me. Pain may be honest, she said. It is not always a good architect. So I chose charges instead of spectacle, restitution instead of humiliation, and records instead of rumors. Integrity was easy when I had no power. The real test came when I finally possessed enough power to wound the people who had wounded me, and still chose not to. Victor was charged with fraud, obstruction, conspiracy, and offenses connected to my father's death. Leonard entered negotiations. Marcus agreed to cooperate fully and surrendered access to the offshore reserves. The recovered money was enough to restore most of the pension losses. Everyone called it a victory. Victory felt like waking at 3 a.m, hearing my father gasp on a recording. It felt like changing my locks twice. It felt like relatives refusing to speak to me, then giving interviews about my cruelty. It felt like seeing Marcus led into court with his hands cuffed and remembering the boy who pulled me from the lake after pushing me in. Courage had not protected me from pain. It had only made the pain meaningful. Daniel returned to work temporarily as liaison to the investigators. One evening, we sat on the steps outside headquarters while crews removed Richard Mercer's name from the executive entrance. I thought winning would feel different, I said. How? Like getting something back. Daniel looked at the workers carrying away the brass letters. Maybe winning is not getting back what was lost. Then what is it? Deciding what the loss is allowed to turn you into. Months passed before the estate court invalidated the altered will. My father's earlier plan divided ownership between Marcus and me, but Marcus's shares were placed under court control. Through the corrected estate and emergency governance orders, I received temporary authority over Mercer Global. Advisors arrived immediately. Sell the company, they said. Take the remaining value before litigation consumes it. Change the name, dismiss the workforce, license the roots, and walk away rich. One private equity group offered enough money that I would never need to work again. For one night, I considered accepting. The company had taken my father, corrupted my brother, invaded my home, and turned my grief into public entertainment. Leaving would not have been cowardice. Sometimes survival means refusing to rebuild the place that burned you. Then I visited the North Warehouse. Hundreds of employees had gathered for a meeting. Some crossed their arms when I entered. Others looked frightened. Rosa Delgado sat in the front row. A driver stood and asked the question everyone carried. Are you going to sell us? I looked at the faces. My family had reduced to liabilities, pension exposure, and labor costs. No, I said. The answer surprised me as much as it surprised them. But the company cannot continue as it was. I explained the plan. Independent directors would replace family control. Employee representatives would receive board seats. Pension contributions would be protected in accounts executives could not borrow against. Every major related party transaction would require public disclosure and outside review. My own voting authority would be limited by the same rules. One advisor later called that unnecessary. You finally have control, he said. Why give part of it away? Because control was the problem. Rebuilding took a year. We sold Victor's hidden properties and returned the proceeds to the pension fund. Executive bonuses were suspended. Several divisions closed, but employees received transition support instead of silent termination notices. Daniel became Chief Integrity Officer after initially refusing the title. Rosa joined the Pension Oversight Committee. We created a protected system for employees to report misconduct directly to independent investigators. The first report concerned a manager using company vehicles for private work. It was small compared with Victor's crimes, but we investigated it anyway. Integrity fails in small rooms before it collapses in large ones. I never moved into my father's chair. His office was restored after investigators released it, but I placed a smaller desk near the window. The old chair remained against the wall, not as a throne and not as a shrine. The calculator sat on my desk. Marcus asked to see me 3 weeks before sentencing. We met in a private room at the detention center. A glass partition separated us. He looked older. Without the tailored suits and controlled lighting, he seemed less like my father's successor and more like someone who had finally run out of places to hide. "I am sorry," he said. I waited. "For the will, the money, your apartment, Dad." His voice broke on the final word. I told myself Victor was protecting the company. Then I told myself I was protecting Dad. Then I told myself I was protecting you. You were protecting yourself. Yes. The admission did not heal me, but it stopped asking me to deny what happened. Marcus placed his palm against the glass. "I did love you." "I know." "Do you?" That was what made it worse. He lowered his hand. "I keep thinking about the lake," he said. "I pushed you because I wanted you to be scared. Then when you went under, I thought I had killed you. You pulled me out. I always thought that meant I was good." "No, it meant you did one good thing after doing harm." He nodded slowly. "Can you forgive me?" There it was, the final burden families often place on the person they injured. Make us feel redeemed so we do not have to sit with what we did. "I hope you become better," I said. "I hope prison is not the only reason you tell the truth. But can you forgive me?" "Not today." His eyes filled. I continued before guilt could silence me. "I will not hate you for the rest of my life, but I will not sacrifice my safety to make you feel forgiven. What happens between us later depends on what you do when no one is applauding." The guards signaled that our time had ended. Marcus stood. "Elena." "Yes." "Dad was wrong about you." I almost smiled. "No," I said. "He was late." The new company charter was completed 14 months after the signing meeting. We gathered in the restored boardroom. Employees filled the seats once reserved for family members and private investors. Independent directors sat beside warehouse representatives, drivers, accountants, and retirees. Daniel stood near the door, where he had once waited to see whether I would lose my nerve. Rosa placed the charter before me. It guaranteed pension protection, transparent governance, independent audits, and limits on executive power. It also established a permanent employee trust that would own part of the company. I used my father's black fountain pen. Before signing, I looked toward the rain-darkened window. The same city stretched below us. The same table reflected the same lights. Yet the room no longer felt like a place where powerful people decided what everyone else had to accept. "Ready?" Daniel asked. I thought of my father's apology hidden inside a calculator. I thought of Marcus behind glass, Victor in court, and employees opening pension statements without fear. Then I signed. Applause rose around the table. This signature transferred no stolen power to me. It distributed protection to people who had never been invited into the room. After the meeting, I stayed behind until sunset. My father's chair stood against the wall. I touched its back, not with reverence and not with anger. He had loved me imperfectly. He had failed publicly and confessed privately. His final decision had not made him innocent, but it had given me a path he had been too afraid to walk until the end. I turned off the lights and carried the calculator with me. Outside, employees were leaving in small groups. Daniel waved from the steps. Rosa called goodnight. For years, I had walked behind men who mistook volume for authority. I had waited for permission to speak, then hated myself for remaining silent. Now I understood silence differently. Powerful people often believe silence means surrender. Sometimes it does. But sometimes silence is where courage gathers evidence. Sometimes it is where grief becomes judgment, where fear becomes preparation, and where the person everyone dismissed learns exactly which page must carry her name. Strength does not always announce itself. Sometimes it reads every clause. Sometimes it protects the truth. And sometimes, when injustice places a pen in its hand and confidently points to the wrong line, strength simply signs the document no one expected.